Hello everyone, and welcome back to another solo spooky story. My name is Rob, and today I'll be your host. For anyone that doesn't know, the solo spooky stories are shorter episodes compared to the main episodes. They're usually about 10 minutes long, and it's just myself just talking about something that I find particularly interesting or a topic that just wouldn't get covered on the main episodes because there just might not be enough content there to make a full 40-minute episode with myself and Suze. I hope you're all keeping well whenever it is that you're listening to this, and you're ready to just get another little bite-sized piece of spooky for the next 10 minutes or so. So today, as you'll have seen from the title, we are talking about another UFO case. This time we are talking about the Kecksburg UFO incident in Pennsylvania, which took place in 1965. The interesting thing about this case, and something that I find just fascinating about it, is aside from the fact that it was seen by multiple witnesses, and we'll get into that later on in a little bit more detail, it's also the shape of this craft, which I find fascinating. And I think that's what kind of makes it stand out against other UFO cases, other reported crashes, and other reported sightings in general of these phenomena. So that's kind of the standout piece about this case. And it's the part that actually kind of caught my eye when I'd heard about this initially. And it's kind of one of those more well-known cases, I suppose, in the UFO lore and mythology, I suppose. So, on December 9th, 1965, a large bright light was seen streaking over Canada, actually, and it was seen then progressing over the northeast United States. Allegedly, thousands of eyewitnesses reported its trail and actually kind of called in to local police or local news or whatever other sort of local network you can think of for reporting these sightings. And it was visible allegedly for hundreds of miles in every direction, which must have just been this spectacular sight when you think about it. At the very least, must have looked like some of those videos, you see of like meteors coming in and just like super bright lights. I'm thinking of that one that was seen this year actually in, I think it was Portugal, where it like lit up the sky in this like brilliant green sort of light. That's kind of what I have in mind, just being able to see it from quite a distance. So in Kecksburg, Pennsylvania, 40 miles southeast of Pittsburgh, Rob and Ray Landy were outside riding their bicycles, and they reported seeing this light in the sky. They said, "We were riding up the road and we just happened to look up into the sky. We saw this thing coming over the tops of the trees. It just glided right across the sky, like across the horizon of the trees. We were just like in awe, as we watched it. Then it disappeared and we ran. You know what an airplane looked like. You knew what a helicopter looked like. And that didn't look like anything we'd ever seen. And the angle that was coming in, I mean, you knew that it had to hit the ground." So these are, from what I can see, the first people that we have kind of quotes from in this area that talk about this. And I don't know if they're the first people that saw the craft, but they're certainly the first people that seem to have commented on it, or are the ones that we're aware of anyway. So a little bit of time passes, and then 3 miles away from the boys, another man, Randy Overley, he also saw this light, and he says that, "I was playing by the creek at the time and I heard a deep hissing noise. I looked up in the sky and I saw an object coming at me from a pretty good distance away. It flew right over the top of me, no higher in the air than 200 feet, and was going no faster than a small airplane would go." So I find that really interesting in that the two initial boys at the start, Rob and Ray, they don't say anything about a noise. They just say they just so happened to look in the sky, whereas Randy says he heard a hissing noise. And so far, actually, I've just noticed that we have Rob, Ray, and Randy. Great names. They must love their hours in Kecksburg. So yeah, it just very interesting. And then he also commented on the speed, actually, saying that it was no faster than a small airplane would go, which I just find it's a really interesting detail. It kind of gives you an idea of, I suppose, the pace of this, and it would, I assume, give you a good look at the object as well if it's not going particularly fast. And then only 200 feet up in the air, that's quite close, actually. For anyone that doesn't know, that's about, I think, 70 meters. So really not that far at all, actually. It's quite close. So after Randy's sighting, we then move on to Nevin and Nadine Kalp. They were playing outside when the object flew overhead, and they reported that it actually crashed in a wooden ravine approximately half a mile away. And Nevin actually said that the ball of fire came through. It's something that I've never seen before and never seen since, seeing the smoke then at the time down in the hollow there. So he doesn't actually report anything else about this, but we kind of have this picture and kind of timeline of how it's gone. So it's entered over the town on the horizon. It's moved across. It seems to be slow enough, and it's descending quite clearly. By the time it gets to Nevin and Nadine, they're saying that it's on fire, and it's quite clear for them to see, and that it ultimately crashes. They see smoke coming from it. So either it's a meteor and it's descending onto the earth and it's burning up in the atmosphere, which is, I suppose, totally possible, or it's some sort of craft, not necessarily a UFO, a spacecraft or something. It could also be a plane or something. It's clearly not working as intended, though, if it's smoking and on fire. So the farm, actually, that Nevin and Nadine are part of, the Calp farm, it's less than half a mile from Kecksburg town, and the object appeared to have crashed about half a mile from their home. And they say that within minutes, Pennsylvania state troopers actually descended on the site. So they were obviously tracking it somehow, or maybe just based on reports that were coming in, they could kind of track its general trajectory. And by the time the state troopers had got there, they said that there was no smoke anymore coming from the site, that the light was fading, it couldn't be seen anymore, but that the smoke that initially had been there was now gone. Search teams were called in to locate the actual crash site, and apparently they actually had trouble with this. It was in some sort of ravine or something, and they were struggling with it. So a firefighter, Jim Mays, he had apparently a good idea to go above the ravine and kind of have some sort of higher vantage point to look down and see if he could locate it. And thankfully he did. So he says, "We went up this road and came to the brow of the hill and stopped, and down to the right on the hollow were these blue flashing lights. It wasn't searchlights down in the woods. It wasn't flashlights or anything like that. It was a real bright blue, really bright. It looked like an electric welder. The flashes seemed to be timed, at what intervals I don't know, and at that point the troopers decided to close the area off, close the roads off, and they brought the two of us back to the fire station with them." So it kind of gives this image of these firefighters standing there trying to find this crash site. They're obviously just doing their jobs, and he says that there's these bright blue flashing lights. I find it interesting that he says they were at intervals or timed, but that he couldn't really determine it. So I don't know if it's kind of in the style of, say, like landing lights that you'd see on an airplane. Is it that sort of intervals, or is there something else to it? But I just find it interesting. But he does point out that the state troopers kind of come in, close off the area, and shut it all down. Following on from this then, it seems to be that even though the state troopers had come in, that there was a call that went out to the local fire departments, and more than 30 volunteer firemen were dispatched from Kecksburg, and they all apparently made their way to the crash site. So I think this is kind of happening simultaneously, that the troopers are moving in, but the firefighters are there too, and they've kind of gotten there maybe ahead of them. I'm not quite sure on the timelines there. One particular fireman, James Romansky, he says there was this huge metallic object, half buried in the ground, about 6 to 8 feet around, and it was every bit 8 to 12 feet long. And to me, the object looked exactly like a fresh acorn that you'd pick up off a tree. There were no wings, there were no motors, there were no propellers, there was no identification whatsoever that could identify it as an aircraft that I would know. There was a bumper on the bottom part of it, and on that bumper there was what I would call, that looked to me like ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics. It was markings like stars and shapes and figures and circles. There was some lines, and what it was I don't know. To this day I've never seen anything like it. So we're all standing around this thing, wondering what in the heck it could be. And finally, here come two men down through the woods. They look at one another, then they look at the object, and they immediately told us to leave. We're in charge here, we're taking command to get out of here. So we left. By the time we got back down there to the fire hall, this place was wall-to-wall military. So the interesting thing about what James Romansky is saying here is, they find the site. He says it's metallic. It looks like an acorn, which is what I said at the start. The shape of the craft kind of stands out. Very different. He says that this acorn basically crashed into the ground and estimates it between 6 to 8 feet around and about 8 to 12 feet long, which is quite large actually when you think about it. He says that he doesn't say anything about damage to it though, which I find interesting. He said that there's a bumper on it with hieroglyphics. I don't necessarily know if he means like a car bumper style, which in my head is just a bit strange. But he does say that there is some sort of bumper on it, and on that he sees ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics. Then says that they look like stars and shapes and all that sort of stuff. So just really, really strange kind of set of events, and really strange sighting. Like that you have this acorn just fucking crashed into the ground and it's covered in hieroglyphics. I don't really know what to make of that. But interestingly, he says that while they're standing there, the military move in and basically just shut it all down. So Moving on from this then, a local woman, Lillian Hayes, says that the military actually came in and took over her farmhouse. It was actually apparently quite close to the ravine, and they obviously took it over as some sort of base. And she says the military were coming in and out of my house all evening. They were making a lot of phone calls and they were standing around in groups talking. I've no idea who they telephoned, no calls turned up on my bill. I just find that as a really cool little kind of bit of, an extra bit of info there. Nothing turned up on her bill. It's such a just cool little detail that she checked for it and nothing came up. It just really kind of adds to the whole mystery of it all, that, you know, they were clearly calling numbers that don't show up or whatever. Also nice to know that she obviously didn't get charged for it. So, you know, that's pretty nice. And then it goes on then where a 19-year-old Bill Weaver, he was a spectator who turned up. So he had obviously seen this in the sky, heard about it, tried to get a glimpse, I suppose, of what it was before it was gone forever. So he says, I managed to get there, I looked down in there myself, and I seen there was something down in the ravine that had bright lights on it. I couldn't see the object itself, but sometime later I seen a van-type truck pull up there. There were some men dressed in moon suits. Great name. We called them moon suits at the time. They had a light-coloured box, roughly 5 foot square. They carried it down into the ravine. So yeah, he's seen someone turn up in what he says are moon suits. I'm assuming he means kind of like hazmat suits. I'm assuming that's what he means. But he does say that the box seemed to be too small to hold the object itself, and that maybe there was something inside the object that the military wanted to remove, but they're uncertain. So back then in the fire station, James Romansky, who I previously mentioned, the firefighter, he says that we looked up and here comes this Jeep over the hill with its red light on, and right behind the Jeep was a large flatbed truck, and on the back of the flatbed was this covered object. And on down the road they went, and where they went, I have no idea. So that kind of ends the story there. So this craft crashed. The police initially shut everything down. Then the military moved in and shut it all down. So we have these firefighters who managed to get there before it all got completely locked down, and they're the ones that reported these hieroglyphics, the shape of it and such, and they're the ones, I suppose, that most of their testimony is taken from. Obviously then we have this teenager who turned up who says that he saw that other box. So I suppose the implication is there that maybe they took something else from the crash site. Who knows? I don't know. But they clearly had something with them anyway. And if they turned up on hazmat suits, you can assume that they either had an idea of what this was and where it was coming from, or maybe they were just taking precautions. We don't know. But I just find this fascinating that this craft kind of came in, crashed, buried itself in the ground, basically. It had this weird shape to it, like an acorn, as they said. I don't know if the shape changed because it crashed into the ground. You would assume the impact would have something to do with it, but I don't know. And then you just have those hieroglyphics, like they said, that were all over it. Just kind of adds to the whole mystery of it all. I really don't know what to make of this. But after that, there's no other sightings of it. Like, some people I saw online talked about seeing the truck and seeing it from a distance. They said that it was approximately the size of a Volkswagen Beetle, which is smaller than what the firefighters had said, but still large enough, like it does track. And that seems to be it. So I've seen some kind of theories online and such about it. Some people saying it was space debris, other people saying it was a crashed satellite, a meteor, all sorts of things. So like there's plenty of theories online about it, and I don't really know where I sit on this. You know, I think it's believable that it could have been maybe some sort of meteor, especially with the kind of lights and such. It could have just been a crashed aircraft, you know, especially with the sequence of lights flashing and all that they talked about. Could very well be. Who's to know? I personally love the idea that it is some sort of alien spacecraft that crashed. Obviously I do, but you know, that's not for me to determine. It's just this really cool case. And I think, yeah, as I said at the start, that the thing that I love about it, that, you know, I find the most fascinating is the shape. It's this acorn shape that I've never really heard of before. It just makes it stand out. It's just something a little bit different. And in a weird way, because it's different, I could almost see it being more believable that it could be some sort of craft. I don't know. But yeah, that ends the story for today. I hope you've enjoyed it. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. I really would, actually, because it's such a weird, strange case. I'd love to hear what everyone else thinks on this. And kind of we could get some ideas going together. So yeah, if you'd like to reach out, we're on Instagram at the Spooky F Pod, or you can get us on Gmail at the spookyfpodcast@gmail.com. We also have a YouTube channel. You know, this episode will go up on YouTube. You could get us in the comments there as well. I'd love to hear though what your thoughts are on this. I'd love to hear what you think happened, where it went, what do you think happened after this. Do you have any thoughts on the hieroglyphics? I certainly do, actually. I yeah, I just found it fascinating that there was like stars and all that he said that he could see. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on all of that. And yeah, I hope you've had a fun one with this, and I'll catch you in the next one. Take it easy.